Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, talking about Tim Connelly's comments he made to John Krasinski about Jaden McDaniels and a pending Jaden McDaniels extension. Will it get done? And reading between the lines on what Connelly said about those negotiations and McDaniels' future. Also, B-ball index numbers about just how incredible he is, just kind of cropped back up again on social media. I want to get back into that, which we've covered previously, but let's talk more about it. Also, Shake Milton, Tim Connelly named him the backup point guard in his comments to John Krasinski. We'll also go through a few big upcoming Timberwolves dates. It's all upcoming to the show. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA or enter promo code LockedOnNBA for a free water bottle with any purchase. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you that. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. Hopefully you've had a fantastic week. And this is the last week before training camp starts. Next Wednesday, September 27th is when training camp kicks off. Get excited. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the show. First of all, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find this show. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. More great local sports coverage 24/7, and it's free. Download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app today on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with two B's, two E's, CKEN. All right, Tim Connelly, Timberwolves president of basketball operations, appeared on the John Krasinski show, the Talk North Podcast Network, and it's a good listen. Portions of it are transcribed somewhere on The Athletic as well. I believe John Krasinski put that out there. And it's a wide-ranging interview, of course, on a variety of topics, as you might expect, leading into training camp. And one of the primary questions that's on Timberwolves fans' minds is, when will Jaden McDaniels get his contract extension? It's inevitable, right? Like, we've kind of chalked it up for a long time now. I've been saying all offseason, like, yeah, just assuming it's happening, right? Like, it's going to happen. It's, of course, a bit unique considering, Ant's already been extended. We already know Karl-Anthony Towns has a super max. Rudy's already on a max contract. Nas just got his extension, albeit only for 2 years and an option. Jaden McDaniels is going to get north of $20 million easily, probably 25-ish million per year, if not more. The Timberwolves are in a tough cap situation, but they have to do it, and they're going to get it done, right? This is year 4 of his NBA career, and it's unique in that he doesn't have, like, the casual fan. Like, you find a random fan in a random state across the country. Do they know who Jaden McDaniels is? I think maybe now, but they probably couldn't tell you much about him other than he's a good defender, right? He's got that reputation now, but he didn't even make an all-defensive team this year. The offensive numbers are not eye-popping. There's nothing sexy about what he's done offensively, except for last year when his three-point percentage jumped to nearly 40%. But still, the volume isn't there, right? He was effectively the 5th option in the Timberwolves offense for most of last season when he was on the floor. And, maybe he bumps up a notch with the exit of D'Angelo Russell and insert Mike Conley. And in theory, McDaniels should have the ball in his hands a little bit more, a few more opportunities. But even with Karl-Anthony Towns out of the lineup for 52 consecutive and 53 total games, it's not like Jaden McDaniels suddenly got a bunch more in terms of opportunities. So he's still a relative unknown on the national stage, and was clearly disrespected in the all-defensive team voting, not making a team at all, although I think he led in votes among players who didn't make the team. And at the time, I explained it away a little bit in terms of there's 4 guys, he was a forward, right? Like, it's however it breaks out, guards, forwards, bigs, or something like that, or wings. Maybe it's guards, wings, and bigs. However it's formatted, there were 3 or 4 legitimate names ahead of McDaniels, and you could understand why, especially because, kind of like in baseball, right? The Gold Glove winners, at least until recently, a lot of times it was in part because they were good offensively, and so people knew who they were, even the voters, as sad as that is. There's a little bit of that in the NBA defensive team, maybe not quite as bad, given some of the names that make it that also aren't incredible offensively. But I just think McDaniels just doesn't have that reputation. And oftentimes those awards lag a year behind where they really should be. So I would imagine, given relative health and relative incremental improvement, Jaden McDaniels, whatever award season is, 9 months from now or 8 months from now or whatever, will be named to one of the all defensive teams. I think that's probably likely. But this extension negotiation is happening prior to that. So that's a little bit of the leverage the Wolves have, fair or unfair. And whereas McDaniels could say, well, hey, look, I was robbed. He could also just pull up that B-ball index graphic that's floating around that was posted the other night. Actually, I think it was posted Wednesday night. And this is something I actually talked about the stat much earlier in the offseason. It might have even been in the Jaden McDaniels player review of the season. The B-ball index graphic is actually, the tweet is about Dylan Brooks, talking about how he's one of the elite perimeter defenders in the league last year. Of course, Dylan Brooks made a bit more of a name for himself in a positive way compared to how he typically did it over the last couple of years. But for Team Canada in the FIBA World Cup, so people are talking Dylan Brooks. So the tweet is about how his most valuable skill is being an elite perimeter defender. But if you look at their headshot plot that they put out on Twitter, and I believe this was shared actually by John Krasinski, Jaden McDaniels is far and away in the top corner. The X and Y axes respectively are the ball screen navigation and perimeter isolation defense, which of course are two different metrics. But this is essentially attempting to show the best and worst overall defenders in the league when you look at those two areas. And yeah, Jaden McDaniels is the best in the league at both of those, in both of those categories. And the ball screen navigation thing is something we've talked about for a long time here on the show. I mean, they were those stats mid-season last year is pretty obvious. He was the best in the league at navigating ball screens. So put him on a ball handler and perimeter isolation defense, he's the best in the league. He's like a 2.5 something per 100 possessions. A plus. A ball screen navigation, he's over 2 as well. If he's guarding somebody off the ball or no matter what the situation is, if Jaden McDaniels is on the perimeter, he's locking you down. He's the best in the league at it, according to both of these B-ball index stats, which is incredible. There are not very many players. I mean, nobody else was above a 2.5 for either one. And McDaniels was above a 2.5 for perimeter isolation defense and just shy of that for ball screen navigation. The next grouping of players is down much closer to the 2 number. Right. And yeah, Dylan Brooks is there, and there's, some guys you might expect and others that you may not up that high. But the Jaden McDaniels positioning on this chart is unreal. And again, it's not a surprise. It's just when you see it graphically like this and something like this takes off across the old Twitter sphere or the X sphere, whatever you want to call it now, it gets a bit more traction. And this is the sort of thing that this helps Jaden McDaniels, right? As silly as it sounds, some of this, public discussion may play into the negotiations a little bit, right? Now, these stats were true 3-4 months ago, just as they are now. But Jaden McDaniels is so unbelievable defensively. To rank where he does in both those categories is just incredible. Real quickly, the quote from Tim Connelly, as transcribed by John Krasinski, is this is regarding contract negotiations with Jaden McDaniels. Connelly says, we'd love to get something done. We want Jaden to be here as long as possible. Oftentimes those back and forths pick up more as the season gets closer, but fingers crossed. In my experience in Denver and here, we like to reward people who earned it. Jaden is a huge part of what we're doing now. He's going to get better and better and better. Great kid. And we think his best basketball is in front of him. As I told Jaden in his representation, the cool thing about extension talks is they should be overwhelmingly positive. The fact that you want an extension speaks to the team's excitement about his upside. Very few guys are fortunate to get extensions. So again, we're hopeful we can meet that point where we're both happy with something moving forward. I think he's going to have a good year. We hope he's here for a long, long time. My commentary on that, it's GM speak, right? It's front office speak. It's Pobo speak, if you will. I mean, yeah, all that's true, right? Obviously, his best basketball is ahead of him. He's like 22. Obviously, he can't say too much. He can't glow quite too much about him because they're in the midst of a negotiation, but he's obviously talking about how the team is committed to him and they want him on board. So clearly it's just like any other negotiation, late summer, early fall, like this thing will get done. It may be done in a week. It may be done in 3 weeks. But it will get done. Jaden McDaniels will be in a Timberwolves uniform for a long time to come. There's no reason why that shouldn't be the case. And things like this B-ball index chart floating around the interwebs are only going to help the case for Jaden McDaniels. I mean, fast forward several months, he will be an all-NBA defensive team, first or second team. And frankly, I'd be surprised if he didn't make it all the way to first team if he plays anything like how he did last year. All right. Next here on the show, I want to talk about Shake Milton. There were also some Tim Connelly comments about Shake, further defining what his role is with the Minnesota Timberwolves this year. So we'll get to that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends, our title sponsors over at Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs, hands down, they just make you look good. They are shorts. They're stretch khaki shorts. They're made with a cloud knit fabric where they look like just your typical kind of golf shorts or khaki shorts. But they actually kind of feel like you're wearing basketball shorts. That's the best way to describe it. Like you're wearing athletic shorts. They look great. They feel even better. It's the perfect combination. They're designed to fit slimmer through your thigh and your leg. They give you a truly sculpted look. The shorts right now, of course, still late fall or late summer, early fall are still in. I'm still wearing shorts where I live. And, I also have a pair of joggers I'm excited to break out. They also use anti-stink sweat wicking fabric. It keeps you cool and dry all day long. And again, they're absolutely comfortable. Plus, right now, if you order them with our promo code, the Locked On NBA promo code, you'll get a free gift water bottle. I've gotten 2 gifts from Bird Dogs. One is a Yeti style tumbler. The other is a tech hat. They're both fantastic, super high quality. So you know that this water bottle will be a fantastic gift. If you want to have shorts that fit you great, make you look awesome, go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA or enter the promo code LockedOnNBA at checkout for a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take off your Bird Dogs. We promise you that. A big thank you once again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, everydayers. We're back on Monday. We're back to 5 days a week. Training camp starts next Wednesday. We'll talk a bit more about that soon. We're going to get into the player preview series early next week as we draw ever closer to actual Timberwolves news, guys in the facility, guys on the court, official practices, and then games overseas here starting in just a couple of weeks. So plenty to talk about as we get into everything next week. Right now, let's talk about Shake Milton. And we've talked a bit on the show about what's the backup point guard situation. I thought the Wolves would bring in like a Javon Carter or somebody that is a legit backup point guard. Or like, for instance, Cameron Payne's out on the market now. Like a Cam Payne would be fit the vein of like a top flight backup point guard, somebody who can come in, run the offense, play solid defense, guard the ball, distribute, can be a lower usage type guy, but also hit a shot if needed. Like that was kind of almost like a bench version of Mike Conley, right? Like that's kind of the mold that I was expecting the Wolves to go for. They did not. Instead, they almost doubled down on these kind of bigger playmakers by bringing in, by keeping Nickeil Alexander-Walker, by Troy Brown Jr., I don't know that I call a playmaker, but that type of a player. And then Shake Milton, who is really more of a big combo guard. I mean, he's 6'5", right? And when he was signed, I at the time I was surprised because, like he's a good player. He's a good shooter. But I thought the Wolves would let Jordan McLaughlin go and find like a backup point guard to take his place. Instead, they kept Jordan McLaughlin ostensibly as a third point guard, decided to bring in Shake Milton. And I just have kind of been saying on the show, I think it's kind of a backup point guard by committee. You bring in, what did I say the other day? You have Alexander Walker and Shake Milton. I think I said this on like Wednesday's show, maybe Monday's show, that Alexander Walker and Shake Milton are basically splitting backup point guard duties for 6 to 9 minutes a game, 6 to 10 minutes a game. And Ant checks back in, like say it's the back half of the first quarter and the back half of the third quarter, start of the second, start of the fourth. Ant's back in the game. He's running your offense. Even if Conley's still on the bench, then Conley comes back in. And Ant ends up playing just as many minutes as the quote unquote backup point guard as these other guys. Well, Tim Connelly in this interview with John Krasinski literally said the words, I'm going to read the exact quote here. He said, "We view Shake as a point guard." Said that sentence. And then he says, he started enough NBA games at that position where we feel confident that he can handle that load, which I thought was an interesting comment. He has, like, he started some games at point guard. the majority of his minutes at the NBA level have technically come at the 2. I guess it depends on how you view his minutes with James Harden last year, right? Like some sites will say he played the 2 and Harden was the point guard. Other sites would flip it. So, in this age of mostly positionless basketball, that's a fair comment to make. He certainly, quote unquote, played point guard if you see Harden as the 2. But he didn't play a ton of point guard minutes without James Harden on the floor last year. And you can go back a couple of seasons to look at that. So like together, Shake Milton and James Harden were really, really good. Like they had a +8 in a 92nd percentile unit, I guess, when they were on the floor together, +8 overall, 665 possessions when they were together on the floor. This is according to Cleaning the Glass. If you look at possessions in which Shake Milton was on the court without James Harden, then things shift quite a bit. And now, for the most part, those are possessions when Shake Milton is running the point guard spot. And when that was the case, they were okay. There were some minutes where he was at the 2 next to D'Anthony Melton. He had minutes at the 2 next to Tyrese Maxey. Those minutes were even better. But if you take where Cleaning the Glass would define Shake Milton as at the point guard spot, Sixers they really didn't have success overall. They were -5.3 and a little over 500 possessions with Shake Milton listed as the point guard. Now, again, this is a little bit noisy, right? Like when he was on the floor with Furkan Korkmaz, and like, for instance, the lineup they played the most with Shake Milton at point guard, according to Cleaning the Glass, was Shake Milton, Furkan Korkmaz, Daniel House, Georges Niang, and Paul Reed. That's more of a defensive-minded, a big, long lineup, right? And they were actually a +5 in 64 possessions. A lot of these other lineups that were used much less frequently ended up with negative plus minuses, or negative net ratings, I should say. Like some of these, he had a couple lineups with Matisse Thybulle at the 2. Those are going to be more defensive, PJ Tucker, more defensive-minded lineups. And, of course, the one that he used the most with Joel Embiid was a +32 over a few dozen possessions. So, like with anything else, the context matters so much, right? So when Shake was the point guard and he was on the floor with Joel Embiid, or he was on the floor with James Harden, those lineups were good. And Connelly went on to talk about how Shake is just essentially a big playmaker, right? Like even if you see him as a 2 guard, he's 6'5" and he's a good passer. He's also a good 3-point shooter. He's a good catch and shoot 3-point shooter. He was almost 38% last year. A couple years ago, he's only 32%, but he's 38% last year, 36.5% for his career from 3. And catch and shoot is right around 40%. We talked about that the other day on the show. Basically, Shake Milton and Troy Brown Jr. trying to backfill the production loss with Taurean Prince in free agency with their 3-point shooting. And they are, above league average, right? They're nearly in the same realm. They're nearly to the same level as Taurean Prince. So I think in general, Tim Connelly's right. Like Shake Milton is the backup point guard. That's how they see him. That's how he will function this year. But I still think we're going to see Nickeil Alexander-Walker running some offense. And when, and I think the 6 to 10 minutes a game is probably about right. Mostly end of first quarter, beginning of fourth quarter, maybe, end of first quarter, end of third quarter, maybe a little start of second quarter, start of fourth quarter, however the substitution patterns end up happening, add in foul trouble, etc. We're going to see Shake and Alexander Walker kind of splitting these backup point minutes. And then when Ant comes on the floor, the show runs through him. And also, by the way, I'm curious to see that diving a bit further into the Shake Joel Embiid minutes is interesting, because we're going to see Shake Milton and Karl-Anthony Towns, I think, share the court quite a bit, because when Ant's off the floor, for the most part, Karl-Anthony Towns will be on the floor and the offense will flow through Cat. Yes, he's not probably going to bring the ball up the court a ton. So Shake will be the one bringing the ball up the court, but then they're going to get the ball to Cat in a 5-out situation, facing up to the basket, or they're going to put him in the high or the mid post and say, hey, Cat, go to work. And then Shake, even though he's quote unquote playing point guard, he's going to wait for the kick out on a catch and shoot, or he's going to be a cutter coming from the, cutting down the baseline from the corner, looking for a dump off pass and a dunk or a layup from Karl-Anthony Towns in the high post. There's a lot to like here about the Shake Towns combination, and also Shake playing with Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Shake playing with Anthony Edwards. But I thought it was really interesting for Connelly to say that. He also says, quote, I think it gives us a different look with size at that position, meaning the point guard spot. Milton's ability to score around the paint, his ability to be a good match for our bigs. By the way, he's really good. Milton's good off the dribble. He killed the Wolves off the dribble last year in that 1-Sixers game. He had, I think, 20 plus. And a lot of it was just straight line drives, like beating his man against the Wolves to the basket. And then Connelly goes on to talk about some of the passes he can make at 6'5". he can make that other guards might not be able to make. So I think I'm not saying this isn't a shot at Jordan McLaughlin, but clearly Shake Milton's a half foot taller than Jordan McLaughlin. So the ability for him to make some of those passes that are more challenging for J-Mac will be a plus for Minnesota as well. All right. We'll close the show here today by talking about the upcoming dates and what to look out for as things are happening, like for real, here as we get into next week. So we'll cover all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at DoorDash. If you're missing the syrup for your pancakes, because hey, we've all been there. We've all made dinner and then realized we're forgetting a condiment or an ingredient. Maybe you ran out of your favorite coffee creamer or just straight up coffee. That happened to me the other day. With DoorDash grocery delivery, you can get what you want right when you need it. You've trusted DoorDash to deliver your restaurant favorites now for years. You can get grocery delivery that actually delivers too. With thousands of grocery stores to choose from, you'll find the best in your neighborhood and boost your local economy with each and every order. You'll get exactly what you ordered, or they'll make it right. So sit back and enjoy quality groceries just like you picked them yourself. You want even more value? You can save on all your grocery and restaurant favorites with a $0 delivery fee on all eligible orders with a Dash Pass membership. With easy substitutions right in the app and best-in-class customer support, DoorDash delivers groceries exactly how you want it. Get 50% off your first DoorDash order. 50% off your first DoorDash order, up to a $20 value when you use the code LOCKEDONNBA at checkout. Limited time offer, terms apply. That's 50% off up to $20, no minimum subtotal, and zero delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter the code LOCKEDONNBA. Don't forget, that's code LOCKEDONNBA for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. All right, it all kicks off next week. Training camp starts Wednesday. That's 5 days from now. Next Wednesday, the 27th, the Wolves and the Mavericks kick off a little bit earlier because they'll both be playing in Abu Dhabi as part of the NBA's, what's the name of I forget the name of the actual campaign, but essentially the international basketball campaign. The Wolves and Mavs actually play, let's see, today is the 22nd. So I think this is 2 weeks from yesterday. If I'm doing my math correctly, the Timberwolves and Mavericks will be playing actual preseason basketball at 11 a.m. Central Time in Abu Dhabi. And of course, it'll be televised in NBA TV. So get excited for, I guess, to be distracted at work or maybe just take an early/longer lunch for the 11 a.m. Central tip, October 5th, again, a Thursday, 2 weeks from yesterday against the Mavs in Abu Dhabi. Then they play again 11 a.m. Central on Saturday the 7th. So some morning basketball you can go watch instead of your morning college football, or go side by side, picture in picture, whatever, multiple TVs, whatever setup you got. You can go Wolves Mavs that Saturday morning, October 7th as well. And then the Wolves come back stateside. They won't have another preseason game for another week against the Knicks. There's actually only one preseason game they have that's at home, and that's against, I need to look up how to pronounce this, but I believe it's an Israeli team that will come to Target Center on October 17th. And then they close on the road the preseason at the Bulls. So their first three preseason games, both Mavs games, and then the following Saturday evening against the Knicks, those will all be televised on NBA TV. And the final two will be on Bally Sports North. The regular season opener for the Wolves, we talked about this when the schedule came out a few weeks ago. It's on the road in Toronto on Wednesday, October 25th. I don't know, a month from now, basically. Like it's we're getting there. And then the Wolves have that start on a Wednesday, and they don't play again until that Friday night. The home opener is Friday night against Miami. Feels like the Wolves have played the Heat and Jimmy Butler early in the season quite a bit in the last few years, although I don't think Butler's really played in very many of those games, if I remember correctly, due to various injuries and ailments. But that's a fun home opener. Miami's obviously legit, even with or without Jimmy Butler. And Toronto on the road is a winnable opener at Toronto. I wouldn't be shocked if the Wolves were favored in that game at Toronto on Wednesday, October 25th. It's a 6:30 p.m. tip on Bally Sports North. We talked a little bit, I think, when the schedule came out. The Wolves have a really limited national TV schedule. I think they have like one national TV game until January, if I remember correctly, and only like 5 or 6 all season that aren't NBA TV, which is nuts. So anyway, that's a thing that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If the NBA wants Anthony Edwards to be in people's living rooms and promote young, exciting stars like the face now of Team USA, apparently, or at least this last round of Team USA, it seems odd to me that you wouldn't want him to be on TV more. But hey, it is what it is. So anyway, Wednesday training camp starts. We'll talk next week. We're going to do a lot of player preview stuff. We'll get really into that And perhaps a couple more, as far as the Wolves have announced, they still have 2 spots left on their training camp roster. So it'll be interesting to see. Perhaps they're more G League type guys, little fanfare, kind of announced with the roster mid next week. Or maybe there will be, they've still got the 1 guaranteed spot. Who knows? Maybe it's a campaign, a Lamar Stevens, a Kennedy Chandler. I don't know. Could be somebody else that's got some NBA experience that finds their way in camp with the Wolves. Remember, there were some late ads last year that also had NBA experience. So we'll see how that all shakes out. If anything happens over the weekend, of course, we'll cover it on Monday's show. We are daily next week, Monday through Friday, and really now until free agency next July. So make sure you're following, subscribed, wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Tune back in on Monday as we get you ready for training camp that starts next Wednesday, the 27th. Big thank you once again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can also follow on Twitter, Locked On T-Wolves, and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.